I'm still interested in girls, but I think Triang railways are probably more interesting most of the time.
Triang Railways was one of the late additions to the Lines Brothers empire, which had started back in the 1920s. During the 20s and 30s, the company's range developed and spread, something which Jeremy Goldsmith is well aware of. He's the curator of the House on the Hill Toy Museum at Mount Fitchett near Stansted Airport in Essex. And many of the Triang toys can be found in this superb museum.
Well, here at the House on the Hill Toy Museum, which opened to the public in 1992, we have over 75,000 toys on display, and Triang features throughout the museum. We have, for instance, a whole range of penguin boats that they produced. In the construction cabinet we have frog aeroplanes and some building sets that they produced as well. Of course, the railways as well we have there. There's other things. We have early tricycles, early prams they produced, early building blocks, even some robust toys like the one above me in the collector's shop. We have an early Triang crane here, which they produced. They produced a lot of these robust toys, and I mean, this would probably date from the 1960s, and today is still in good condition. Has probably had quite a hard life, so they have stood the test of time. Throughout the museum we have loads and loads of different Triang things. If I was to stand here and mention all of them, I'd be here all day, but there's a real selection.
Scarborough, South Bay, on a fine August afternoon. It's here Pat Hammond finds inspiration for his Triang Railways books, though surprisingly he originally doubted he was the best person to write them.
I wondered whether in fact I was the right person to be writing the book, a feeling that perhaps this was something Richard Lines ought to be doing. And so the first thing I did was to write to Richard and tell him what I was proposing to do.
We spent some time together, and he persuaded me with very little difficulty that he was utterly serious and very straight. And in fact we got on quite well, and I was very happy with it, and I always think he's done a fantastic job. His diligence is beyond belief. The degree to which he investigates and records, absolutely marvellous.
The start of the book was quite easy, having got the card index system already put together. I'd got the facts there. The book was then started, believe it or not, in pencil on ordinary sheets of paper. Pencil so I could rub it out and alter it. I wrote one side only, so there was room for additional information to be put on the back. And I got a long way into it before I had a typewriter. And then eventually had an Amstrad computer, which is nothing like a PC today, but it was a great advance for me because it meant that I could put in corrections without total retyping. And in fact the first book was sent to the publisher on continuous stationery and was about this thick. And when it arrived there, somebody then had to retype the whole thing.
And this is the original pre-publication version of Pat's first book, returned to him for changes and corrections. Now, nearly 10 years on, it's been fully revised with this changed cover. To find out the attraction of collecting Triang Railways, we visited the major train collectors' fair held in Rugby. But firstly, the Midland Railway Centre in Derbyshire, where the Triang Society were holding a weekend exhibition. Miles Rowland is their founder.
One of the best looking of the Triang locomotives was the EM2 Electra, and Electra is herself at the Midland Railway Centre in Ripley. We were invited through the EM2 Locomotive Society, of which I'm a member, to attend here and to exhibit.
The origin lies in the fact that my father doesn't like anything German because of the war, of course, and its effect it had on my family. So when I was old enough to have my own train set, he didn't want to buy me the usual Märklin or Fleischmann or whatever continental stuff. And Triang started exporting to Holland in 1959, so he bought me their first export set for Christmas 1959, and that was how I got my first Triang set. And I stuck to the make ever since, and I'm still collecting it now.
A, it was colourful, and children tend to like that. B, there was sufficient variety to make it interesting.
I think Triang had a vast range of charming products.
I think, from my point of view, it just brings back a lot of memories of my childhood, and remembering that I had the car set and the railway set that I used to link together in my bedroom.
The Rugby Toy Train Collectors event also has exhibitors, and James Day has a number of working Triang exhibition layouts. So why did he start collecting Triang?
Well, I was brought up on a very strict diet of Hornby Double O. My dad was a great devotee of Meccano Limited, and in fact he still is. But I used to look at the Triang catalogues, and I used to look at all the things they illustrated, the buildings and the cars, all integrated together in those lovely pictures. And I thought I'd love to do that. But it took me quite a while to get into it. It wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I was able to actually get some of it and actually start getting this layout together.
Also spotted at Rugby, Eric Large, a leading collector of the fairly short-lived TT system.
First got into TT when I was given a Triang TT train set for Christmas when I was a child. Played with it for a few years, as you do, and then I put it away, passed it on to my brother, and went on to other things. After spending a few years dabbling in trying to model in 3mm scale, and not very successful, and over that period acquiring more and more Triang pieces, I drifted into collecting. A lot of it came from toy fairs, some of it came from advertising in collectors' gazettes or local papers, and buying collections from people, small collections, one or two large collections.
D3115 draws to a halt on Eric Large's TT layout. More on TT later. Richard Lynes was the son of Arthur Lynes, one of the three founding Lynes brothers, one of whom set him to work in their Merton factory.
My uncle was a great believer that everybody who worked there should know all about how all the departments worked, and so when joining, one was planted in any random department and left there for a couple of months to find out how it worked. And then after that you got moved on somewhere else. And I think it was quite a good system, because one stage was making prams, and I moved on from there to model airplanes, and then I had a go at dolls, and then some sort of push chairs and things. So one got a good general grounding in what it was all about. I think it was probably in September 1951 that we got wind that there was a small firm at Richmond making a electric train, and that it was really worth looking at, and it was sold exclusively through Marks and Spencer's. So another chap and I were sent off to buy a sample of this, which we duly did. Triang bought this firm Rovex towards the end of October 51, and for some reason I don't know, I was planted there with another chap from Merton who was an accountant, and given a rough idea of what to do, but told generally to get on with it and not to hang around. Well, this was a fairly tall order, as the factory was a very adequate, really. It was an old brewery. You went in through the front door of the cottage, and on the left was the place where the electric motors for trains were made, and on the right it was on the side of a hill. You had to go downstairs to a large hall, which I suppose in the brewing days had been the main brewery, and in there were all the injection moulding machines and the tool room and the stores and that sort of business.
Now, these sketches show the layout of the factory drawn from memory nearly 50 years later by Richard Lynes. The most noticeable change is the replacement of the adjoining house by a modern office, now owned by PSD Associates, a design company. The rear still shows the space for the goods out, and the classic windows and doors remain. The bus stop is still there, and apart from the name change and the building replacement, little has changed. And this is quite a rarity, a surviving engineering drawing from Richmond. It's the Rovex Scale Models trademark, drawn in May 1954 and used on the girder bridge for the next 10 years. The irony about Richmond is it could outlive the Margate factory, where Richard picks up the story again.
And we engaged a local builder to build the factory, which was extremely satisfactory. It was a very good firm, and everything went according to plan. I think the timing was good. And we made our first move, I think, in May '54. We had some new plant on order, which was delivered direct to Margate, so that Richmond would not be interrupted. And there were new moulds. I think one of the first items we had was the girder bridge and level crossing. And we gradually took on new staff through the summer months. And it was about middle of October, I think, that we finally got right out of Richmond and became 100% based in Margate. We had a terrific project to turn what was basically a simple train set into a complete model railway system, which meant every possible conceivable piece of track shape, hosts of engines, coaches, wagons, stations, signals and such like. And I was really the only person who was there to say what we were going to do next. So I made a huge list of all these items, and we struggled our way through them because we didn't have enough staff to do them all at the same time, so we had to pick priorities. I think one of the first ones we had to tackle was stations, because otherwise the train set looked rather bare. And it seemed we were never going to get there, but by diligently beavering away, we did eventually get there. And looking back on it, it all seems to have been done quite quickly, although at the time it seemed that we were never going to get there.
A perfect 1960 layout, showing all the charm of Triang Railways. Overlooking the cliffs at Scarborough, Pat Hammond has an inspiring view to help him prepare his third book. With all his knowledge, what products for him have the charm we've been seeking to identify?
Right from the start, Triang made a very attractive range of station buildings, and these were available in various packs, but this was the top of the range set, and judging by the number that have survived today, it must have been a very popular set. It has in the lid here drawings of various other things that you could buy to extend the range. One of the parts that is frequently missing from sets is the chimneys. Very small, they disappear. Very nice to find one as complete as this. The Minnit's plastic car range was brought out purely as a support for the model railways. They were useful as loads for wagons, the Carabelle being a good example, but they were also sold separately, individually packaged, and here is a display unit which was designed especially for shops. And amongst the things here we see some of the rarer items. For example, the caravan is not often seen in a boxed condition like this. But the rarest one here perhaps is the bus, which is obviously smaller than 00 scale and probably closer to TT. Whenever Triang produced a series of something, they never did it by halves. They went the whole hog. And a good example of that is the catenary system done for the 00 railways. Here we have a whole range of different products, all which went together to form an excellent system. There is the gantry, for example, that allowed you to do double track lines. There's the single power mast. There are various bases for different types of track. There are the insulators. Even the catenary itself went through two systems. This was the early one, and that is the later one where it's just a simple wire. Even the bridges had to be raised to take the catenary, and these special piers were made to take them.
The catenary system was extremely well thought out, and though perhaps a little delicate, it makes a very elegant and highly realistic sight, if not charming. This could almost be the West Coast main line with a tunnel of gantries, and on this raised section the system had been cleverly designed to allow mast clipping to the walls. Similarly, the two pantograph designs for locomotives were elegant, though the one on the Electra was fragile. Today, like many other spares, replica replacements are available. Combining of Tchaikovsky's music to the movement of trains. A challenge indeed. As was this model, the Road Railer, another of Pat Hammond's favourites.
One of the product ranges that was designed to go on the back of Triang railways was, of course, the Minnit motorway system. And there were many features of this that were totally compatible with the railway. And my favourite is the Road Railer, which you see here, and came as a complete system with different types of track and so on that fitted together, and the vehicles themselves. Took a lot of thinking out, but it does work.
Well, that may be open to dispute, but this was the principle. Lorry arrives, trailer disconnects. Then locomotive with the adapter bogie arrives, connects to the Road Railer. The train then departs. Pat's final favourite was much simpler.
After the move from Richmond to the new factory at Margate, the first product to be made was the girder bridge. Here we see it in a presentation set, complete with the incline piers and some of the side walls. These sets went on for many years and varied considerably according to what the contents were.
Earlier, we briefly mentioned the TT system. This was manufactured to 3mm scale, and these were some of the charming accessories. Some were similar to the OO system, but others were quite different. A card of badges would be difficult to find today, and of course coach seating was a well-established OO accessory. Locomotives followed the OO pattern to a certain extent, though this gold-finished merchant navy was quite an oddity. It was made along with similar dazzling coaches for Kay's catalogue, and today is a choice collector's item. Continental locomotives and rolling stock also featured in the range. And there was a good selection of sets with distinctive yellow box lids. And today, those featuring Continental models are really difficult to find. It was the models made in the final year of production that are most scarce. Production numbers were small and sales very low. The system was almost doomed from the start, as retailers were not keen to stock two different Triang ranges.
The retailers weren't very keen on it because it meant they'd have to stock a complete new range of trains if they were going to do it all, which they didn't want to do. And the other thing about it was that although it was a lot smaller than OO, it in fact cost just as much to make, and therefore there was no reduction in price. You had to pay the same for the little one as you did for the big one, and people didn't think this was fair. So we did, I think, cut our margins on TT to a pretty unacceptable level in order to make a difference. But we pursued it, and we continued to invest in it for, I think, probably about 6 years, by which time we had accepted defeat. And finally we decided to stop investing in it and just run it down peacefully. As far as I remember, the moulds were put into the tool store at the Margate factory, and I've not heard that they're not still there. They may well be.
And there they are in the Margate factory, though whether they're TT or not is a different matter. In the nearby tool shop, all is now silent in what 40 years ago was a place of great creativity. Moulds are very difficult to easily identify, but here's the Ginty, which must have seen a lot of use over the years and still looks in great condition today. Well, the former Triang factory is now 2/3 empty. Hornby are quite rightly moving with the times, but retired employee Peter Oliver can still accurately picture the scene.
Well, in 1966, 31st of January 1966, I came here in actual fact to answer questions and queries regarding Frog model aircraft, which had moved down from International Model Aircraft in London. Here we are walking down the middle of the factory now. On my right-hand side there was about 3 or 4, probably 5 lines, all of production, ladies sitting there all doing the same type of job, assembling coaches, loco bodies, chassis and what have you, with the radio going to keep them all happy because it was a very noisy place. And then on my left was the pen lining for the boilers. Women used to sit there all day long with a mapping pen, just going round the boilers. Well, over here we've still got the spray booths, which were still in operation a few months ago, but looking around now and seeing all over here where it's all empty is very sad, really, when you consider it was an absolutely packed factory.
Indigo. Oh, look at that. I was over there. What's that over there, look? Oh, blimey, it has changed.
Well,
it hasn't changed, does it? Hasn't changed. Up here.
Well,
Here hasn't
the
changed.
yellow brick road.
Yeah, yellow brick road.
Back to the Triang factory after many years. These ladies worked on the production line, 2 of them starting as long ago as 1958. And they've not seen the factory as it is today. So perhaps a few surprises?
A lady in there. Oh, we want a lady in there.
No, that's sacred.
Oh, it's not as it was anyway. It's packing in there. Oh, it's Colin. It's Colin in there. Yeah.
Canteen's still there.
Yeah. That's the shop in there. They're changing
Oh,
the shop.
garage to pay a visit there quite often.
Yeah.
I never did take my money home from Rovex.
The
moulding
machines. The moulding machines, they moved them here, didn't they?
That's right, there, yeah.
Yeah, my bench was right on that wall.
Yeah. We worked here for different...
No, nothing at all like nothing at all like when I worked here. Not at all. No, not me. No, no. With all machines and everything all the way round. Yeah. Oh dear.
Yeah.
That one.
That one.
Britannia.
Oh, yeah, Britannia.
Yes.
Yeah. That was... It's got a... Yeah, it's got a motor in it.
An old motor,
An old,
yeah.
with the old brass, brass wheels underneath.
Yeah. That was the day I put the wrong switch on. And I gave them all an electric shock. And me.
Oh, look. Remember that one we used to do? All those heavy wheels on it.
Terror,
And then
wasn't
it was a terror to do, wasn't it, eh? Yeah, that's right.
Bugger to
yeah,
test.
the gear. Not too bad in the gearing, but the actual wheeling.
Soldering
really
inside
wasn't
there, oh
yeah,
dear.
Yeah, that's right. And that one...
That's
that's
even
a
worse,
smoke.
the rocket.
Yeah, the rocket.
That's right.
That was a smoking unit in there. And if you didn't, the solder wasn't small enough, you couldn't get your top on.
No,
It just wouldn't run. That's when we had problems with that. But it's very
Remember,
neat.
we done overtime on this one. We only
Well, to
done
get
it.
the order out. Yeah, hours overtime, you got about 2 hours by the time
Yeah.
you ran the right. But it's a nice
Dreadful.
little train, but it took the time to do.
And that one, what's this one?
Well, that's a diesel one, isn't it?
Was
That's
it
heavy,
diesel?
yeah,
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
heavy thing, that is. It's got on there, electric
But that Winston Churchill brings back memories.
Yes.
Bad memories, I tell you.
Yeah. No, snow came in, didn't it?
Yes, snow. We sat there with an umbrella once, remember?
That's right, yeah.
Oh,
Really
great, but had a few look, new doors on the toilets.
Good grief. Good grief, new doors. Don't know what's like up?
Tool room.
Tool room.
Yeah.
Tool room.
Had a few large in there at Christmas.
Yeah.
And the nostalgia continues to flow. By now they're back in 1962. The factory was always famous for its exhibition layouts. Presumably these 5 were responsible for this one. Just look at the architects and model land. Where it went, we have no idea. But this is the one that went to Woburn Abbey in 1964, though they have no trace of it whatsoever. Again, architects and model land are used along with a wealth of track and scenic features. spot the Hornby 00 plastic girder bridge and Britain's trees. Even today, a former catalogue layout was evident in the factory, so the tradition lives on. You can't beat the sight, sound and smell of the real thing. 47357 is a Ginty built in 1926 in Glasgow by the North British Locomotive Company. Much later, in the 1950s, quality plastic moulding was still in its infancy, yet Triang was achieving a high standard in its models. The Ginty was such a model. So what's the opinion of someone who drives the real thing?
Well, the model, in my opinion, it's a very good model. I've had a model railway set myself for years, and I've got 3 of these actually that run on it, one in the LMS and a couple in the BR. And compared with the engine and this, in my opinion, there's no difference. They're both top models.
We also took Electra to meet its namesake. And how about this for a compliment?
Considering this is a 1961 locomotive, it holds up extremely well against some of the modern productions. I mean, of its day, this was deemed to be a beautiful model, and it remains so, and I think captures the look of the EM2, which unfortunately is basically a box on wheels. It captures the look extremely well. The detail is very fine. I was up on the roof of the real Electra this morning putting the pantographs up, and to look at the vents and all the pantograph detail, it's just about there, and there's not many people who get up on the roof of an EM2 to compare it with the model.
Most of the Triang models were, of course, based on authentic prototypes, but the use of plastic made a lot of difference to the appearance of them. When you compared, for example, a wagon in tin plate alongside a Triang one, there was no competition. They also, from the start, used 2-rail track, which was a big attraction. The secret was to know the level of compromise, and I think overall they got it right. Triang also ensured that you could look after your locomotives, and no company did more than they did in providing information leaflets, maintenance manuals and so on. They also produced a home maintenance kit, and if you couldn't manage to sort out problems yourself, you could always take it to a local service agent. They soon found that they couldn't handle all the servicing themselves, and so they appointed service agents through retailers. Each retailer would be given a service box. The early boxes were quite large. Obviously they took up too much space in the shop, and somebody advised them to produce a smaller one, and so 1/2 the size was made.
At the sharp end of servicing during the Triang era and beyond was Colin Hitch. He still works in the service department for Hornby today, but back in the 60s, roughly how many locomotives did he have returned each week?
Well, I suppose we used to get in the region of about 100 or so, sometimes between 100 to 200, depends on the time of year it is. Primarily it's due to, dried up bearings and covered in oil. Brushes used to clog up with carbon and the commutator slots used to be clogged up.
And still on Colin's workbench, the original Triang service manual, just in case. Nigel Evans is now retired, but has strong memories of two particular contrasting models from the early 60s.
One of the products I particularly remember being tested on my walk around the factory was the helicopter car being tested in a celluloid tube of about 3 foot high with a red tape mark about 2/3 of the height of it. And a very nice lady with long red hair used to wind the ratchet motor on the wagon, sit the helicopter on it and activate the trigger. And if the helicopter managed to get to the red mark on the celluloid tube, it was a pass and it was okay. Also I remember is the production of the Lord of the Isles locomotive, because it was vastly different to previous locomotives in that it had vacuum plated dome whistle to represent brass and copper, and it also had many extra items on, such as sand boxes, sand pipes, all of which added to a beautiful looking locomotive, and it stood out on the shop floor as a very attractive locomotive.
And after 40 years, it stands out on the Margate factory floor once again, along with a few others who've made a nostalgic return to their roots. This girder bridge was the first model from this factory in 1954. The unmistakable sound of an Australian, American, Canadian, South African, or even Indian train, certainly not British. And these were the models Triang made to support those export customers. Under the name of Triang Railways, or simply Transcontinental, the company tackled the export market. And the order to do so came apparently from on high.
When we were designing the new products and the new system, we were under pressure from my uncle, who was particularly internationally minded, to make trains that were suitable for export. And of course, generally speaking, in overseas markets, they like to buy trains that reflect what they see. And that things like our Princess and the little 060 Ginty that we developed were not really suitable for sale in overseas markets, either in Europe or America or Australia or anywhere. So as a result of this pressure, we tried to design some virtually international types of train, which is why we call them transcontinental, because it didn't say which continent it was. And we came up with some rather imaginative models made from photographs in bad magazines and so on. Really didn't know what we were doing. But anyway, this resulted in a considerable range of overseas type trains, and we did in the end sell quite a lot of them overseas, which we certainly wouldn't have done if we hadn't made them. But the curious thing was that they also became very popular at home. And this, I think, perhaps was due to the fact that they were more colourful than the British trains.
And colourful they were too. And today, like the complete range, very collectible. To find a Budd rail car with lights is no easy task. But we must never lose sight of the fact that they were always seen as toys.
Great attention was given to the play value of the models, and good examples of these are the travelling post office. With that, and with most of the others, Triang tended to go for a mechanical means of operation as opposed to electrical. They found that this kept the cost of the item down, and in many cases was more reliable. Other popular examples we have are the helicopter car, the rocket firing wagon, the giraffe car, and the side tipping wagon. The fact that Rovex Scale Models Limited was part of a much bigger group, Linesbros Limited, paid very much in their favour. It helped not only in the marketing of it, but the other members of the group were encouraged to produce compatible models. And indeed, the success of Triang Railways was very much to their benefit because they were able to produce ranges that could sell off the back of it. Examples of these were the real estate building kits which IMA Limited produced. These later became Model Land. We also had Young and Fogg Limited making rubber buildings for various companies, but most of those rubber buildings were in fact made for the railways. Minnit Limited produced Minnit Motorway in the same scale. Spot On Limited had architects, and they produced a special 00 scale range of architects, and even produced the ultimate railway station, which was packaged in Triang boxes. These all helped those companies, but also helped to show the diversity of Triang Railways.
And that diversity contributed to the charm. But it all started with ideas that started on drawing boards. To Triang collectors, these products will be familiar, but who would have thought so many dimensions went into the lapel badge? And this is the blue Pullman power car, drawn on the 30th of March 1962. The quality and accuracy for a toy is unbelievable. Not everything passed the drawing stage. On March the 6th, 1964, the lifting bridge drawing was completed and then dropped. Dave Stone started as an apprentice for Triang on September the 25th, 1961. This was his first drawing on his first day, the bolt for the bogie on the CKD coach.
As a draftsman, you're given a brief of what they actually want. Normally it comes through, they're going to use a standard chassis, standard wheels, standard weight, standard smoke unit in those days, which was synchro smoke. And then basically it was your job to actually take these standard parts, build it into this loco, and then put either new body on it, smoke box doors, chimneys, kind of tender. Each individual item that was new had to be drawn, separate sheet of paper, or in some cases 3 sheets of paper, which normally something like a loco body could be something like 5 weeks. You're actually sitting on the board doing one drawing. Some of these included the fog signal, trackside fencing, plane launcher.
Today, Dave rarely sits at a drawing board. It's been replaced by his computer, and on the screen, a familiar recent Hornby model. He's been with the company 40 years, and will no doubt be entitled to receive one of these cherished presentation locomotives. These were given to the ladies we met earlier, who certainly have positive views about their time with Triang.
My time here to begin with was very strict, but you knew where you stood, and it was a family atmosphere, and it wasn't bad to work in.
They seemed a very good employer, as I remember. I cannot remember having any problems with the management. I felt it was, I believe they were okay. Yeah.
When I first started, not very good, but after I've been here for a couple of months, I started to get used to it, and it was very good, and I thoroughly enjoyed my work here for the 22 years that I worked here.
Triang was very good all the years I worked here. It got easier, and I was very sad to leave.
As an employer, Triang was not too bad. I had like everyone else, had my fair shares of troubles, and they would always help me out, and if I wanted time off, there was never any problems. No, I got on quite well.
So finally, how accurate were these charming models? Well, the easiest, though most demanding way, is to compare them with their current Hornby counterparts. Hornby is now making excellent scale models, and here's a comparison of just 3, spanning nearly 40 years. Make up your own mind. Hornby is justifiably proud of its new range, but the 40-year-old models still come a commendable second. Simon Kohler is Hornby's marketing manager, and he believes even today their present success lies in an inherited Triang business ethic.
I think the philosophy of what I would call the Triang days on the Hornby that I became aware of when I first came here was very much there, because a lot of the managers of the Triang days were still here. There was Richard Lyons, who was part of the Lyons family, which was Triang, and how he saw the business and was virtually the same as it was in the Triang. I think his favourite phrase at the time was, "They make jolly good toys which make excellent models." Philosophy was there, but they weren't blinkered. In those days they were trying new ideas, new developments, new production runs, new approaches. So it wasn't stuck in the 60s, but to produce a good model that people wanted was something which I think came over very strongly from the 60s. Yeah.
So the influence lives on, and so does the charm. The collectors of today can testify to that, and we've given ample evidence in this video. But that charm is best seen in the delight of the original owners. In the early 60s, this Defender set was a favourite, with plenty of realism and play value. And we leave you with original archive film of this set being opened by its proud 10-year-old owner on Christmas Day in 1962.
it wasn't just a game all my life. It's been hard work, but I've enjoyed it.